I'm Ayisha Mendez, and I'm here with Erica Cobb, national TV personality and producer of the NAACP Image Award nominated podcast, Comeback with Erica Cobb. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Ayisha, it is my honor to be here with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And so, Erica, you've had such a dynamic career from getting your dream job on television at a young age. Can you talk me through, was there ever a point throughout your career where you felt a tension between building out an incredible career for yourself and thoughts about motherhood?
I think my journey to become a mother, as well as my journey to become a successful professional person, has always been a little bit at odds since the very beginning of my career. Being in media, especially starting when I was like really in my teens, early 20s, there was a lot of messaging that we don't accept currently. I remember one of my first big break opportunities. I was brought in, I was very young, I was very excited, and there was a woman who had been there before me, not in the same role, but she was pregnant. And I remember the conversation between the powers that be that I was there now and maybe there wasn't a need for her to return. And I think in hindsight, they probably thought that was a compliment for me, but I just remember thinking about being in her shoes one day. And was that a signal that I needed to perhaps put motherhood on the back burner and not pursue it as vigorously as I was pursuing my career so I could have both?
Yeah, and I think it's so incredible that that's something that you've heard, because I feel like for a lot of us, especially young women of color, we hear a lot of times that like women are having kids later, and the fact that like, hey, if you have a cure, will that derail your career? And the fact that you heard that at such a young age from people in your industry, I can't imagine how that thought stayed with you throughout your career and has led you to kind of some of the decisions you've made today. But thankfully, I'm so glad you're here. I think that brings me to one of your most recent projects, Fertility Unfiltered, an incredibly powerful and personal series where you break down the barriers and conversations around potential taboo topics around infertility, maternal black health, as well as access. So can you talk me through, why did you choose to center your award-winning podcast around those types of conversations, and how did your journey shape that decision?
Yeah, so Comeback is my brand, and it's been my brand since 2016, and it really came from a period in my life where I had a major setback season. So divorce, unemployment, bankruptcy. And the with on Comeback with Erica Cobb is the most important. That's the action step, because unlike a lot of other podcasts where you're coming on as an expert, I'm coming on as a testimony teacher, really inviting my audience to come along this journey with me or maybe right behind me. So I think just because of the transparency and the nature of Comeback with Erica Cobb, it's always lent itself to being vulnerable. And what I find with the vulnerability is it creates community. So people have come back with me from bankruptcy, they've come back with me from divorce, and now some of them, the same people, are coming back with me on this fertility journey, which is just very exciting.
That is incredible that you've been able to build a community through such authenticity. And I think that's something that's probably why you've been able to build such an incredible following. I think that storytelling plays a huge role in not only your business, but your personal life, and being able to bring your community alongside with you provides a level of truth telling where people actually want to hear what you're saying and they actually trust you. Can you talk about how shifts in journalism and media has influenced the way that you tell stories?
Oh, shifts in journalism and media, especially in the past, I would say, I would pinpoint to maybe 6 to 7 years, has definitely shifted. When I first started my transparency or testimony teaching, it was unheard of to really go on to social media and talk about the things that weren't going right in your life. I got a lot of pushback and scrutiny for that. But what happened was around 2017, when I booked Daily Blast Live, That show was a 360 format where we were on digital and on broadcast. And what was happening on digital that hadn't quite made it to broadcast in that moment was the age of transparency. People were becoming more real and vulnerable with their stories. And so for me, it was almost like a perfect storm because I had already done the things where I, unmasked and I was very honest about my life. And so it was just a natural transfer to broadcast, which was very early on as well, like you being a part of the story in order to tell the story. So that was effective from everything from social justice to the fertility journey. And I think that we're seeing more of a shift. You're seeing people who generally we were used to just seeing the highlight reel, and they're saying, but this is how I got here. And I think when you are generous as a testimony teacher, you're only rewarded personally, you're only rewarded professionally. And I think those are the things that people really connect with just over the test of time.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I feel like you divulge a lot of that in Infertility Unfiltered, where you share your decision, your journey with infertility and your decision to move forward with IVF. Can you walk us through a little bit about how you came to that decision and some of the other pathways that you had considered prior to deciding to go with IVF?
Yeah, so IVF, the decision to do IVF was really not one that I did voluntarily. When I started testing, which was the most important, I always tell people, specifically young women, know your fertility status. The earlier that you know your fertility status, the more options that you'll have, and also the more economical they'll become for you. I was someone who did not learn my true fertility status until shortly before my 41st birthday. Wow. So my options became a little bit more limited. And what I was told from the onset was, you need to do IVF and we need to do this fast. As you know, the older you get as a woman, the less your egg supply will be filled in that way. Your egg supply progressively gets less, where men don't have to worry about that, on their side. So I was told right away, like I would need to do IVF. I did 3 rounds, basically back to back to back. And from there, the hope was that that option, that pathway was going to give me options. I got very lucky. One, I had been with my husband for, at that point, 6 years we had been married. He was definitely, wanting to grow our family as well. So we were able to create embryos. What some women don't understand is that, yes, please freeze your eggs. I tell young women all the time, if you're kind of like not sure, this is insurance. Freeze your eggs. But the truth is, embryos are much more viable in terms of being frozen than your eggs. Either way, whatever your options are, utilize those options. But at 41, that's where I found myself. IVF to embryos to transfer. And then unfortunately, my 2 transfers resulted in miscarriages back to back.
So sorry.
Thank you. It's something that it's a part of the journey, but I feel so lucky and fortunate because, one, we were in a position to go the gestational carrier route and start to explore that. But also I had the insurance of 3 embryos. So the likelihood of there being a viable pregnancy is still very much within my reach. And that's what keeps me very motivated and optimistic.
Building off of what you just said, can you explain a little bit more about what piece of advice would you have for women who are, as you said, as a young professional looking into wanting to have kids? They might not have a partner, but they know in the future that they might want to explore motherhood. What other pieces of advice would you have for some of those people?
This is when community is so important, because just like all of our experiences, we are the experts of our own experiences. But when we build community, we find that people have adjacent experiences, that are a part of the community. One thing that I really love about my podcast series, Come Back with Erica Cobb, is throughout the years I've been having these conversations. Actress Kelly Stewart has this amazing partnership with Evite, and she was talking about how she didn't have a partner. She felt in her spirit that she needed to freeze her eggs. She developed egg showers, and it really makes total sense, but like, why are we not thinking like this? Especially for women of a certain age who don't have children. We have gone to a million baby showers. We are celebrating, we are loving on it, the whole thing. But what do you do if you're a woman who wants to become a mother, maybe doesn't have a partner, wants to freeze your eggs, maybe it's a hindrance, like financially? Egg showers. This is a way for your community to support you in basically securing your maternal future. So as opposed to, getting the diapers and all of that, they're literally donating to help you to, relinquish or get rid of or help you with some of the costs that it takes to freeze your eggs. So I think things like that are really important for people to talk about and understand.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because we're actually going to talk through the financial side of all of this, right? I think that something that doesn't really get talked enough is the fact that a recent NIH study found that assisted contraceptive treatments can cost anywhere between $24,000 to $38,000, which is a major barrier for many. And to know that there are egg showers out there to actually help support women throughout that journey is something that's incredible, and that our community should really definitely look into. I'd love to also segue into a little bit more about your specific experience. We found that studies show that Black women are 2 times as likely to experience infertility, but less likely than white women to seek help or timely referral or treatment. From your perspective, how much of that gap is related to lack of access to knowledge or affordability?
I think a big percentage of that gap is related to knowledge and affordability, but I also think a big percentage of that gap is also related to the lack of representation in those spaces by medical professionals. In my case, I had access to all of the resources, and I was still very delayed. Now, was that a part, my fault? Yes, I can absolutely take responsibility for that delay, but I also am someone who am just kind of, if a professional tells me something, I am inclined to believe them, which is not a great thing all the time, And so for my situation, I did have an OBGYN who was like, well, if this doesn't work, then we'll try this. But she didn't seem alarmed, so I didn't become alarmed. And in hindsight, I think I was protecting myself from becoming alarmed because I didn't think that it was going to help. But in hindsight, I think I would have, been a bit more proactive, because when I finally did get the help and assistance that I needed, it came in the form of a Black female OBGYN. I just happened to be hosting a baby shower at my home, and this was her, the mother's OBGYN. I was having what I thought a lighthearted conversation, and she looked at me and just immediately said, I need to see you in my office this week.
Wow.
And that's when I knew, and so when I think about it now, it's like, yes, access is a barrier, education is a barrier, representation is also such a barrier. So being your own advocate in these spaces is, if there's any takeaway from this conversation, it is that.
No, absolutely. And I think that speaks to why having these conversations are so important. For conversations around infertility and assisted contraception that could be taboo, if you didn't have that conversation at that baby shower, who knows where you would be today. And I think so many people, so many women can relate to going to the doctors and saying something feels off. I don't really know if this is normal, but the fact that the medical doctors are telling you that this is something that's okay, you are in your own mind saying, okay, I need to trust them. But I think there's something about female intuition where you have to trust your gut, and I think that's something that's so powerful, and now it's led you to be able to explore these opportunities to pursue motherhood, which I think is so beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd also love to know, as you've mentioned, having these conversations at your baby shower, you're very open and transparent and authentic around this journey. Did you ever experience a time, whether talking to friends or potentially older generations, where they felt a bit taken aback by your decision to explore IVF? How is that generational culture? How did you manage to have those types of conversations or navigate it?
So I love this question, and it's very interesting because I am very fortunate in that regard that not only my family was like, okay, so this is what's happening. My husband's family, same thing. Like, there wasn't that, and I know exactly what you're talking about in terms of the generational divide with this assisted contraception, or like, it's all of there. It's a different world. The reason why I'm so aware of it is because during my fertility journey, especially at the beginning, I was on a daytime talk show, and we were live every day, and live with the ability for our audience to communicate with us in real time. So it wasn't my inner circle or my family, thankfully, but I certainly saw the diversity of thought, specifically with older generations who generally are your demographic for daytime talk shows. A few of them, and I say a few, but in terms of percentages, a lot of pushback about the idea that I was so old. And it's not fair to a child to have like such an old mom.
Wow.
Am I aware of the risks? It's not the way that God intended it to be. I heard all of these things, which honestly, I think my whole life and career, I've kind of had a contrarian spirit. So if you tell me that I can't or should not do something, I'm more than likely going to. Not that, so it's not, that's the reason why my fertility journey happened. It was more like it emboldened me to speak out more because I knew that these sentiments were out there, and I can handle a lot. My reservation about being open about some of these conversations is, what if there's someone out there who is going through the same thing that I'm going through, and I'm getting this feedback? Are they able to handle that? And that's when I become a little bit more like, I'm in a standpoint of like, I'm protecting, I want to have this conversation and let shut these people out. And I know for a lot of people that's difficult because it's coming from their mother or their aunt or grandmother or something. But I'm here to say, I think that they really do mean well, but at the end of the day, you have to do what's best for you. And if this is your journey, then step into it.
Absolutely. Well, I am so proud of you for making that decision, and I can imagine how many people you've inspired by being able to be so transparent in your journey. And I just want to also just tap into briefly what you mentioned about women commenting on your age and the fact that it's potentially not natural. But there are so many men who have children who are so much older, and they never get questions like that. And so I think it's also looking at just to your point about knowing who you are, knowing what you want, and not being afraid to go after it, and you being able to set that example for other young women or older women who still want to see this dream come alive. And then I would love to know, for those listening, is there a community or resource, I know you've mentioned one a little bit earlier, that you would recommend for a woman to feel seen, to feel supported, to get real answers as they're exploring these potential options?
Yeah, I've had the privilege of sitting down with a lot of amazing women. There is obviously Earth App and Birth Fund. These are very much, about Black maternal health focus. But I always encourage people, if they're on social media and you're going through something and you're using the hashtags and it's starting to come up in your algorithm, I think it's very organic in a lot of ways how you're finding your community that way. When I brought up Kelly Stewart, who is a major advocate in this space, and that relationship happened very organically because of the content that she was creating. It spoke to me in a way that other content hadn't spoken to me before. So I think, there are obviously amazing places to go for resources, but I think in the moment of your journey, it should be very authentic. You know, there are places where it's a little bit more collectively generated, like Black Maternal Health, Black Women's Health Imperative, which is an amazing organization. I've done a lot of work with them. That can kind of source a lot of your community content, but don't feel like there's one specific community that you have to engage with and resonate with. Do what feels natural to you in the journey that you're in, and maybe that evolves into other things.
As CEO of ComebackTV Presents, what's next? You've already told this incredible story around your infertility journey, around IVF. What is next on your radar that you're looking forward to sharing with your audience?
So I love the way that media is going, and I love to have been a part of, you know, media in some capacity in the past 25 to 30 years. So Comeback TV Presents was really birthed out of this very authentic and natural way that myself and my team were able to produce stories. Our team is completely comprised of all veteran media professionals, from on-air talent like myself, journalists. We have, you know, the camera team, the field team, the editors, and producers. And what is really happening is we have taken our experience as a newsroom team, and everybody knows when it comes to nobody's out working a newsroom, okay? Like, we know, we understand in this space how important the storytelling is and the cohesiveness. So what we've done at Comeback TV Presents is we've wrapped a newsroom around industry. So from energy to wellness, a newsroom demographic and a newsroom storytelling strategy has proven to be the most effective in terms of strategic messaging and consistency. And it's really no different than the stories that we're telling on Comeback TV Presents through Fertility Unfiltered or the CEO and Comeback. Like, all of these personal branding and industry brands are really kind of colliding in this moment. And so now we're seeing industry and corporations really doing what content creators were doing back in the day when that first started. So that's been a really lovely shift for us, and it's been very organic since we've moved from the newsroom.
That's incredible. And so, like, are there any specific stories that you're looking forward to or that you're excited to tell?
Yeah, so one of our clients, we are really taking over the energy space with this client. And what we found is, over the past, you know, decade or so, there is a misunderstanding of energy in general. How does energy work for us, the average consumer? And what we're finding now, because of the political climate, is that people are asking more questions. Why don't I have eggs? Why do my eggs cost so much? And we have a very, we have less than a full understanding of how energy is working for us and how we can be more mindful in the conversation of what's going to happen to our earth, what's going to happen to our communities, and what happens when things shift in terms of tariffs and things like that. And so it's been very interesting to work in this space to bring more of a bipartisan sentiment to the headlines so that people really understand what this legislation means. So I didn't necessarily see this coming around the bend, but it's been really exciting to be a part of this conversation, to put the knowledge back into the hands of the American people.
Absolutely. Well, I'm looking forward to staying connected with you. Would you be able to tell our listeners how can they continue to follow you, follow your story, and to just stay plugged in?
Yes. Well, first of all, Ayisha, I thank you so much for this opportunity. I think these conversations are so important. Building community and understanding of one another really does make us all better. So I really appreciate that. For anyone who wants to follow me, you can always follow me online at Erica Cobb on all social platforms. And also, Come Back with Erica Cobb is on my YouTube as well as my podcast. And for more on what we're doing for Comeback TV Presents, we are on all social platforms, and Positive Energy Campaign is our baby. So any information that you're getting from that, or if you have feedback on how you would like to see these conversations structured, we're always willing to hear from you. So I really appreciate that too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.